Hey guys, welcome to another exciting edition of Spidey Talk. I'm your host, the J-Man. Alright, so last time I was talking about the Clone Saga and some of the problems and criticism I have with the Clone Saga. Now, I'm not sure you're aware of this, but there was a Clone Saga rewrite in 2009, and this was done by Howard Mackie and Tom DeFalco. So, my question is, do you guys out there, anyone who's read this book or knows about this book, do you think it should be an official retcon? Should they just take this story and use it as a replacement to the actual Clone Saga that was written back in 96, 95, 94, 95, 96, and some of 97? I just really want to know, where does this Clone Saga fit in the timeline? I mean, is this just going to be considered an alternate, or is this MC2? Is it the prequel to Spider-Girl? You tell me. Right now, it's looking like a prequel to Spider-Girl, which would make it MC2. But to some people, even me, I prefer what happened. I prefer that continuity. I prefer this Clone Saga over the old one. So. But it can't really become an official retcon, can it? Because everything that has been written since the end of the Clone Saga is basically, based on the events of the outcome of the Clone Saga, with Ben Reilly's death and all that. Ben Reilly proved to be the clone, because we saw when Ben Reilly was impaled by the glider and his body deteriorated. So that pretty much proves that he was a clone. Even though I don't think that story holds up very well. I don't like it. Logically, I find it hard to believe. Okay. Which leads me to another major problem I have with the Clone Saga. The decision to make Norman Osborn the mastermind, the guy who set the whole thing up, it was his idea from the beginning, to bring in Ben Reilly, establish him as a clone, and establish him as the real Spider-Man, make Peter Parker doubt himself. That whole entire stretch of imagination seems very convoluted to me. The fact that Norman Osborn could be all the way over in Europe, alright, he didn't die from being impaled by the glider. Okay, I can kind of believe that. But he's been pulling the strings the entire time. He's been the man behind the scenes, overseeing all these turns of events in Peter Parker's life. He's really that obsessed with him. I just find it so hard to believe that he would go to the extreme measures of hiring some scientist to create a clone. And there's so many other ways that he could have taken care of Peter Parker on his own, or not even on his own. He could have other people do it, but to create a clone of Spider-Man, that just doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, and okay, what else? The whole thing about the Mary Jane, Peter Parker baby, that really pissed me off. And I think it pissed off a lot of other fans. Bob Harris, the editor-in-chief at the time, it was his idea to have Norman Osborn as the mastermind, okay? To me, Norman Osborn isn't that much of a scientist compared to people like Dr. Octopus, which would make more sense if Dr. Octopus had planned this. He could have come up with the whole cloning idea. But Norman Osborn is not that type of guy to want to use a clone or to clone Spider-Man. It just doesn't seem like something he would do. But, okay, whatever. And the fact that he stole their child. He abducted their child there. Really, that was a whole revenge thing? He just wanted revenge on Spider-Man, that's why he stole the child? That still doesn't make any sense to me. Really, I don't buy it. He must have had further plans for the child after that. But it was never talked about. It was never discussed or mentioned again in the Spider-Man titles and the 616 Marvel Universe. Yeah, so that's extremely, extremely disappointing. A lot of major things happened in the Clone Saga. Not just the death of Aunt May, which was a beautiful story written. Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man number 400, written by Mark DeMatteis. Beautiful story, elegantly written and detailed. It should have never been retconned. You know, even though the death of Aunt May, a lot of fans were upset about that. I mean, Aunt May is a major character and she's pretty important. So why do you have to kill her off? The writers felt like they didn't have anything more to write with her. They couldn't use her anyway, so they got into a writer's block and they decided to kill her off. That's a very controversial decision, but the story itself was very nicely pinned, and I think it should have been left untouched. Keep her dead, keep that whole story the way it is, but somebody had to go in there and retcon it. And say that Aunt May didn't really die, that was actually an actress, blah blah blah. But yeah, now we all know eventually the whole thing is that eventually Aunt May is going to die. She's really old, and it's just like eventually she is going to die, right? She has to at some point. So how else are you going to do it other than that? That was the perfect send-off for Aunt May. Completely ruined. It'll never be the same. It'll never be as good. If Aunt May has to die at some point, it'll always be a failure compared to what was in Spider-Man number 400. Amazing number 400. So that's very unfortunate. And then also the killing of Dr. Octopus, which happened during the Clone Saga. Excuse me. Kane brutally murdered Dr. Octopus. Extremely controversial. Have such a classic character and one of the top Spider-Man villains killed by Kane. Even though that was also retconned, I think that was one of the worst decisions that they made, was to kill Dr. Octopus. So that's also something that gives the Clone Saga a bad rap. Furthermore, the Clone Saga was just really bogged down by all this creative conflict. The editors and the writers, they couldn't come up with ideas that would flow. They couldn't agree to their concepts. They couldn't agree to development, and it just really started to show up so bad. And I think that whole time period, Marvel, was going through a financial crisis, but it really took its toll on Spider-Man. The story suffered, the characters suffered, and so looking back on the Clone Saga, there were a lot of bumps, a lot of plot holes, and it's so unfortunate that we couldn't just retcon the whole thing. But if they did retcon the whole thing, how would they do it? I wish they never even brought in Norman Osborn to, keep the guy dead. That was a classic story. He should have stayed dead, at least for quite a while longer. I just didn't see Norman Osborn as the mastermind behind it. I think it would have played out much better if they had used the time loop scenario. The time loop scenario that they came up with included Judas Traveler and the Seer basically being these highly powerful, mystical, godlike entities who were kind of waging a war between each other, having a debate, and they made a bet, and this concept was basically developed by one of the co-editors at the time. It was a very accepted or encouraged idea, but there were still people that were against it. But anyway, the story, I think, would have logically wrapped up the Clone Saga a lot better. You can read about this on wikipedia.org. Also look up the Life of Riley blog on blogspot.com. which explains all of that. But yeah, man, that's just some of my very big complaints about Spider-Man: The Clone Saga, and even the Clone Saga Redux or rewrite from 2009 still has its flaws, its problems. I wish this whole thing could just be, you know, fixed somehow, rewritten. But unfortunately, that's life. Alright guys, well, thanks for watching my video, and see you next time.